Oh, behind the ears. Okay.
Just go around.
Turn around?
Yeah, turn around.
They got to see the back.
Stop.
So we are reporting back from the studio, aka my kitchen. We were just in Newark for the past weekend, UFC 302 in person. Even though it wasn't the most exciting of cards in the cage, I'd say we had a pretty exciting experience. You guys could go watch the vlog, obviously, if you haven't already. You'll see what we got to do over the weekend there. And honestly, we had some entertainment even in the crowd, like just with us, with those two guys fighting the... We had Poirier versus Islam going on in the cage, and then we had two of their fans going at it in the co-main event here in the stands.
The lone Islam fan.
Yeah.
He was wearing shades. He didn't even want to really reveal himself either.
Yeah, Poirier fan was quick to call him out on that one. I obviously got the tail end of it for the vlog, but which turned into a really funny moment because like it just shows you how MMA works. Like these guys are arguing, we think they're about to fight, and then the crowd goes crazy over something in the cage, and then everybody turns at the same time. Argument's over. But really fun weekend though. What do you think of your event experience?
Yeah, man. So obviously going out to before that we were able to obviously catch the Atlantic City ceremonial weigh-in. So our second ceremonial weigh-in, this time for a pay-per-view. Obviously that was awesome in and of itself. What it was, dude. Literally at first I thought it was a shoe that Kevin Holland threw into the crowd.
If it was a shirt, which I think it was, it went pretty far. So maybe there was like it was either wrapped up perfectly or there was something in it, and it could have been a shoe, but not really too sure.
Yeah, dude. Kev had an awesome weekend too. We'll get into that obviously shortly, but between that, Ariel's Roadshow right after. Getting to see all those incredible fighters up and that close and personal like that. Afterwards, meeting the man himself, Ariel. Obviously, our guy New Year's Rick, getting us set up with that. Getting to talk to GC a little bit, just the whole MMA Hour crew. Man, like that night alone on Saturday, was like that alone was enough to for a good quality content video vlog, whatever you want to do with it. But the fights themselves the next day, talking to the Hammer before that as well, and then going out to the Prudential Center itself, being a part of that environment and that crowd for the first time finally. It's the kind of stuff you just dream about and envision, like when you just from the moment you really dip your toes into the sport and just watch on TV and all that, and indulge yourself just from that, just like that as a fan watching at home. So when you get to the fight itself, it makes the moment like that much more surreal in a way. So
well, we've talked about it too. Like the UFC is kind of different than some other sports, like in the sense that there's things that go on there, like for the live event that you never see on television. Like, you mentioned to me over text, like the Face the Pain thing. I like the Baba O'Reilly thing that always starts off the pay-per-views in the arena. You kind of can hear it sometimes in the background when, you see the start of the pay-per-view on TV. But to be there for it, it's electric, man. They really know how to put on
It's always cool. I think one of the more underrated sort of things, maybe not obviously for a promotion as huge as UFC, but when you go out to live events and shows and whatnot, just getting a feel for the production side of things and kind of the things that go on behind the scenes, if you will, that you obviously don't really get that full you get to really look at on TV and know about. So from a production side, just UFC just does obviously an incredible job. And then dude, that was pretty sick, because I heard that probably something to do with the ESPN deal, that Face the Pain intro was just not something that they broadcast anymore. So it was just super cool to obviously see that in person and get to show off to our viewers and stuff what that was like. And just man, all they had to do was just get to the card itself, let the fights begin, all the action begin, and the Prudential Center, they came out, they showed out. It was just a lot of fun to be a part of.
Yeah, well, it needs to be said too. I mean, we were two of many people in that crowd. I mean, let's just be honest. The prelims were pretty awful, and the crowd was like with it the whole time. What I kind of compare it to is when we went to New Orleans a couple of years ago for the Saints Monday Night Football. They got blown out by the Ravens, but the dome was just electric the entire time. Didn't matter how far down they were. And it took 6 fights for Jailton Almeida to get the first finish of the card. And it didn't really feel that way. Like, everybody was still amped the whole time, still excited. And, I mean, that's just incredible.
Yeah, man. Pretty much all you just had to hear those 3 magical words from Bruce Buffer, pretty much. The "we are live," and everyone was well back into it. But yeah, man, the prelims were putting a lot of people to sleep, to be honest. That's just all there really was to it. Jailton Almeida injected that shot of life with his finish.
Sort of Hafez versus Gall too. There was no finish, but that was a good fight.
Underrated banger for sure.
Definitely a good one. But
it was for the crowd itself. Obviously, the Mickey Gall, the American fighter, not getting the dub. That put a sour taste in everyone's mouth. But man, they put on a good show regardless. And that's just all there was to it, really.
Well, speaking of a good show, I say we hop into the best part of the show, which I would say is the main event, and Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. I mean, what do you even say about this one? We thought coming in, like most people probably, that Dustin was going to have a hard time stopping Islam Makhachev's takedowns. And it seemed like Dustin Poirier heard the noise because he was doing so well defending against those takedowns. He said he trained specifically for those get-ups because he knew that's what he'd have to do in this fight. And on the feet, like, he was landing too against Islam. I thought the thing about this fight is it looked really rough early for Dustin because Islam got him down and then took his back almost right away. And we were like, oh, God, it's already a wrap. But then Dustin got out of it, which was even more impressive. He ends the first round, survives a couple minutes with Islam on top of him like that. And then rounds 2, 3, and 4, Islam didn't really have an easy time taking Dustin down. And when he would get him down, Dustin would pop right back up. And on the feet, the exchanges were pretty close. I know the crowd was for Poirier, so it seemed like every time Poirier landed, everybody would go nuts. But, have to be unbiased. Islam Makhachev outstruck him in almost every round, which, in my opinion, is super impressive because we were talking about the striking being the advantage for Poirier. And I've always been of the belief that, Islam is a pretty good striker, but to outstrike someone like Dustin Poirier, that's really impressive, and it says a lot about his kickboxing. But, I mean, we could really go anywhere with this conversation. Just the performance of the challenger or the performance of the champion. I'll give you the floor. What do you want to talk about?
So, I would say kind of like a tale of maybe two narratives coming in, since that, Islam hasn't had all that much of even just winning the title itself, and then defending it hasn't, before this fight, face someone like Dustin Poirier who's going to take him to those limits and is going to, whether Islam wants to stand or not, Dustin's going to force that out of him. And then another case of maybe Islam just not putting enough confidence or belief behind his ability to strike, especially with someone like Dustin Poirier across from him. So I think early on you saw that. I could even credit to what Arman Sarukian was saying to Ariel, how he thought the fight would go, that Islam's going to go for those single legs, and all Dustin has to do is defend it pretty much. It's obviously a lot easier said than done, but Dustin obviously did a very good job of that and surviving the ground in general. And so, we saw it, man. We saw Islam Makhachev face that adversity, have to rally a little bit, lose around here and there. And it took the 5th round, sure, but it didn't have to go to the scorecards one way or the other. And on this card, of all cards, you obviously with all the decisions we had, this is the last card you wanted it to go to the judges on. So the champ, he knew he had to pull it out, however which way. and he got that Dars nice and tight on Dustin, and retained the title.
I mean, besides the part that I already mentioned with Islam striking, outstriking a good boxer like Dustin Poirier, just the fact that he was able to overcome that adversity. He showed so much grit. He was up on 2 of the scorecards, 3-1, but then one of them had a 2-2. Very close fight, and Islam was tested. I mean, when Dustin hit him with that elbow, he was obviously cut pretty bad, but overall, he was still able to outstrike him. But like you said, in this card, it was kind of, a little bit nerve-wracking to leave it to the judges' scorecards. But then round 5 comes, Islam's typical approach wasn't working, and he changes it up. He goes for that ankle pick and actually gets Dustin with it, swept him right off his feet, and then hit him with that Dars choke pretty much right away. And it was almost like watching a different fight in that 5th round, because Islam changed his approach so much and it worked instantly like that. And I think that there's a lot to be said for, not just Islam, but a champion in general, to have such a tough defense like that after everybody kind of thinks that you're going to walk through this guy, and then all of a sudden he's defending the takedowns and you have to play his game a little bit. The fact that Islam was able to not only play his game, but he was able to do better at Dustin's game, and obviously gets the finish in the 5th round after having to go through a war for the first 4 rounds pretty much. So just a really awesome performance for Islam, awesome performance for Dustin too. And that's kind of like where I want to go next, talking about what's next for both guys. We'll start with the winner for Islam. Now, he talked about wanting to go up to 170 to fight Leon Edwards. But he said if Dana wants him to fight Arman Tsarukyan first, he will do that. And I do believe him. Islam's not really the type who runs away from fights. He truly believes he's the best, wants to fight anybody and everybody. He thinks he'll beat anybody they put in front of him. So I personally think Arman has to be first. He's the clear number 1 contender at 155. Do you agree with that or no?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'm just gonna say too, though, I understand where Makhachev's coming from. I think it's more in the sense that, not only does everyone want that champ status at some point, but he just wants to build his star up in general. Because, I mean, we clearly saw it this whole weekend that despite being the champion, despite being the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter on the rankings, he still probably just isn't getting, probably still just getting slighted a bit too much by fans. And like I said, one of the narratives coming in was that he just hasn't been tested enough. So now coming out of this fight, beating a legend like Dustin Poirier, I think it's now that he probably just understands more and more that he wants to keep just building that star power up, period, and just making the name Islam Makhachev like a true household name.
Well, let me ask you this though,
history.
like he's getting booed like he was at the press conference and at the weigh-ins, even fight night. Like, I think of people like Floyd Mayweather that everybody didn't like, and believe me, I'm not comparing like their star power in the mainstream media, but I think there's something to be said about that level of fan interest, whether it's for him or against him. You know what I mean? Like, even if they're booing him, they still care. Like, they want to see Islam lose, which is better than not caring whether he's fighting or not, which I would say that's a positive. And I think Islam obviously has that Habib element to him, like, not only just in his style, but also obviously he trains with him. He's trained with him forever, and fans know that, at least like the true fans. So, I don't know. I do think he's a star, but I do agree with you that he's trying to probably up that a little more by getting the Leon Edwards fight. And, I mean, even thinking about that fight stylistically, it is a good one. Mm-hmm. Islam going up to 170, so maybe we'll see that if he beats Arman Tsarukyan. Honestly, maybe we'll even see it if he loses to Arman Tsarukyan. Yeah. But the thing is, Islam's won 14 straight now in the UFC, which is 3rd all-time for a UFC winning streak, and he just looks like he's unstoppable.
I mean, it's the lightweight division too. There's really never, I feel like, going to be that shortage of names of guys that are at least super close to fighting for the title and even winning it. But I think Islam will probably know, and I feel like he would obviously welcome a matchup with Arman Tsarukyan, just stylistically and all that. And I'm sure one day we'll see him fighting for another title. But like, in a way, it's kind of like even I think of Sean O'Malley would at some point might be fighting for the featherweight belt, but there's still contenders obviously at bantamweight he's got to take care of first. So that's just that's how I see it pretty much. I understand where Islam's coming from.
Well, let's talk about Dustin Poirier now next. Obviously, he says in the cage to Joe Rogan, this could be it for me, but doesn't really commit to it. I don't know if Dustin Poirier fights again. I'm not sure if we saw his last fight. Maybe one of those big money fights could lure him to go forward, but he's kind of made enough money with those McGregor fights, and it seems like, his teammates, Arman Tsarukyan, Kayla Harrison, they both kind of said the same thing at Ariel's show. The money narrative really isn't a thing for him. Like, he's got it made. Let's just leave it at that. He doesn't really need those extra huge paychecks to survive.
And even if he won, then it would just be the matter of fact of getting to retire on top, which obviously, only so many people in this sport especially get to do. So
I don't think there's a question of whether or not he can compete with the top fighters at 155 anymore. It's just like, why bother? He's proven so much already. He's beaten some of the best fighters in the game, and he's been across from some of the best fighters in the game, even if he hasn't won all of them. But I just think he's earned the respect of everybody over his time in the UFC, which has been a long one.
I think he understands that. It's just I try to put myself in his shoes, and it's like because I also saw a clip asking. It was testing him about if he could name every undisputed lightweight champion, and he obviously had to ask a little. He was like, "Do interims count?" And then obviously interims didn't count. So for sure, like that eats at him inside. That 3 undisputed title fights, and he hasn't gotten his hand raised in either of them. That definitely. That's got to be super hard to stomach. It's probably gonna eat at him even when his career is long and done. Whenever he involves himself in anything to do with MMA, but I just as a fan, getting to experience that live, obviously, see the Diamond walk out and just take number 1 pound for pound champ to his limit, which something we haven't really seen even close to yet to this point.
Well, Volkanovski.
Right.
To a point,
True.
though.
Yeah.
That was more of a technical scrap. This one, Dustin
and
had
that
hurt.
and that too. That's a difference between weight classes, anyways. So, for that to be Dustin Poirier's last fight, then I don't think he's got much to hang his head about. That's just how I feel.
Yeah, he's already a UFC Hall of Famer. Take that with a grain of salt. Obviously, the UFC Hall of Fame is what it is. But overall, great main event, in my opinion. Both guys showed out. And, I mean, like I said, the card in general wasn't too strong. But the main event, I would say it kind of made up for it. But to kind of move on to the co-main event now, Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa. Sean Strickland defeats Paulo Costa by a very puzzling split decision. So one judge had it 50-45 Strickland, 49-46 Strickland, and then Dave Torelli had it 49-46 Costa. And that might be the worst scorecard I've ever seen in my time watching mixed martial arts. Might be the worst scorecard in MMA history, maybe combat sports history. But then again, some boxing scorecards have had us scratching our heads in the past. But Dave Torelli, I don't know if he needs like a prescription for good glasses or if they need to drug test him, but that was insane. I mean, I didn't even give Paulo Costa 1 round. I don't know how you give him 4. It's unreal to me. I don't know how that happens. And I don't know what the consequences of that should be, but I guess before we get into the actual fight, I mean, this will probably kind of lead us into that conversation, but what did you think of just that insane decision? Because thankfully Sean Strickland won, but when they said 49-46 Costa inside the arena, I think we were all like, okay, let's hold on a second, what?
Yeah, that was something for sure. For a sec, that had everyone holding their breath. But I, I guess to start, you could see Paulo try to and then even like towards the end of the fight, you could see Paulo try to make Strickland back up and a little uncomfortable, not take the center as much as Sean Strickland did, but. All I was really seeing was just Paulo circling and trying to just pretty much just trying to outbox Sean Strickland pretty much. I think that seemed like the game plan was just kind of beat Sean Strickland at his own game, except he was circling instead of coming forward, and so I mean that seemed like one of Sean Strickland's more easier fights, to be honest. Just to I think the story of the fights were definitely the teeps from Sean Strickland and him wanting, like, I guess you could say him obviously wanting to engage and have a brawl with Paulo Costa, but I could see too that it was also a lot more technically sound from Sean Strickland and kind of what we as fans are getting used to at this point from Sean Strickland, that like he is a rather smart fighter actually, and he doesn't have to just go, because he's a former champ, but he's not that guy that's gonna technically take one and give it back that much harder. So I think that
I just think his style is so weird to watch, because you don't really see too many guys who come forward like that but are also so elusive at the same time, and it seems like that's what everyone who fights Sean Strickland struggles with, especially in those first few rounds when they see that weird, awkward movement. He has such a good jab and a fast jab and those teeps like you mentioned. I just think Paulo's game plan made it easier for Sean than Sean probably would have imagined it was going to be. Because the way I see it is, like, if Israel Adesanya tried to do what Costa did, backed up and tried to counter, if he couldn't do it, Paulo Costa isn't going to be able to do it, because Izzy's one of the best counter strikers we've seen in the sport.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that kind of seemed like Paulo's just trying to just straight up outbox Sean Strickland and beat him at his own game, in the sense that, like, they were just pretty much trying to catch each other's jab, except that Sean Strickland's the one who's more effective on the front foot and backing up Paulo Costa, and just a better striker anyways. So.
I mean, Sean's jab is one of the best in the sport, in my opinion. He doesn't get enough credit for that for some reason. Like, they say he's a good boxer, but they don't talk specifically about that jab, because I think now he's second all time in the UFC in significant strikes, and a lot of those are that quick jab or that power jab that he has. And, it may not look like much, but when you're landing it over 100 times in a fight, it tends to do some damage, or at least helps you at the judges' scorecards, except for Dave Torelli, I guess. But, fans were mad about this fight because they thought it was going to be a banger, and it wasn't. I don't really think Sean Strickland is to blame for that. He pushed the action. Paulo Costa just couldn't really do much with Sean's style, it seemed like. I don't know, this just seems like one of those cases where it was the matchup just didn't really work as well as maybe the matchmakers figured it would. But I think that Strickland looked great, and that has to be said. He was dominant. I had it 50-45 Strickland, definitely not 49-46 Costa. His jab looked great. His kickboxing in general just looked great. Just super impressive. And, I have in the notes here, like, what's next for Sean Strickland. I don't even think that's much of a conversation. I think it has to be Dricus du Plessis. Whether they make that before the Adesanya rematch, or before the Adesanya fight, or after the Adesanya fight, doesn't make a difference to me. Strickland should not have to fight for another time before he fights for that title. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, no real argument for me. That's kind of just what middleweight is at this point, to be honest. The top guys are gonna fight each other pretty much. I mean, unless you're Sean Strickland, you take like any fight, but even he at this point is like, I'll sit and wait for a title shot, because that's just...
I mean, he should.
Yeah.
He's, like he says, he's a company man. He's taken so many fights, on short notice, or just against guys that maybe didn't really do much for him, and it was a big risk, and he still took the fights and won them. it's just, I think he's earned it. That fight versus DDP was such a close one. I think that was one of the best fights of 2024 so far. And it almost gets slept on because I think that pay-per-view in general just wasn't really as good. But kind of like this one, the main event kind of stole the show. And I think that Strickland versus DDP 2 needs to happen.
Main event, that's interesting you say steal the show, knowing that the next fight and fighter we're going to talk about.
We'll just get to it because there's not really much of a conversation. Like, I don't know if the Kevin Holland fight steals the show because what does it mean?
Yeah, right.
I'm not saying the performance wasn't insane.
No, yeah.
But
what does it mean? And also, I think another thing that's gonna fly under the radar too. But even Kevin Holland had to get the finish from his back. Even Kevin Holland had to eat a shot and get knocked down to be able to do what he did on this card. And then even then, I think that's what, at least what Kevin Holland probably should have wanted anyways, was for the fight to be on the ground. I understand that. It also is the case that he is coming back up to middleweight. And so obviously the reach. There's not going to be a crazy reach difference or whatnot that he would have at welterweight, but we saw I really don't want to say his name but Michael
Oleksiejczuk or something like that.
We'll say Michael O. Michael O. Fucking he packs a powerful punch. We saw that there, and he was the one that he knew that he wasn't going to let Kevin loop in those shots and whatnot. And just strike from range, and so he landed a super powerful knockdown, and then from there,
it's been a minute since Kevin's felt that middleweight power.
That's real stuff, dude. And so for Kevin to have the wherewithal to just obviously stay in it from that, and then bring Michael O into his guard, and then just take the arm and lock in an armbar like that. Takes a lot of and then especially too for this guy to just keep taking these fights on short notice and all that, talking about hey, I walk around at 185 anyway, so he got thrown onto the 302 main card. It was awesome. I've loved watching Kevin Holland ever since 2020 pretty much, where he was fighting on every Apex card. It's cool to see. It seems like he's come a long way. Afterwards, he might feel like, oh yeah, I'm the best gatekeeper you guys have ever seen. Either
might be true.
Fighting up,
might be true.
Fighting up, fighting down. Just keep Kevin around. I think it's pretty awesome. But I think Kevin Holland too, at the same time, I think he does deserve a little bit more credit than that. He's a guy that can really take guys to their limits, I feel like. So I had a lot of fun watching this fight, and obviously seeing that finish happen. So.
Yeah, it was the second of 3 on the entire card, and I'd say that this one was probably the coolest in the sense that it happened so quickly, and it was such an explosive type of finish. But yeah, man, Kevin Holland overall, you could just see this past week how beloved he is by the fans. Mm-hmm. Isn't that insane?
Yeah.
He got a pop like Poirier did.
Yeah, that was something I was definitely expecting to hear loud and clear and just see in person while we were over there. And it didn't disappoint really whatsoever. Yeah, man, the guy, he just did that right afterwards, greeting Trump outside of the cage.
Strickland too.
Yeah, Strickland too. And then, like I just mentioned, his post-fight interview was that was pretty smooth right there for Kevin Holland. He's got some bars up his sleeve clearly, but
he can talk with the best of them.
Yeah,
for sure.
Dude,
he's got wit.
So yeah, it'll be super interesting to see what's next for him, pretty much.
Yeah, he has a ton of options. I think with someone like Kevin Holland, it's so hard to guess what could be next for him because he could be fighting at 170, he could fight at 185, it could be against someone in the top 15, it could be against a prospect. He truly will fight whoever you put in front of him as long as it kind of just makes some sense. And, I think he just likes to get in there. He likes to entertain the fans. He's got one of the most fan-friendly styles. He's a talker, like I said, and I think the UFC knows that they have something special in him, whether, whether or not they think he's going to be a champion someday is irrelevant, in my opinion. They just know that the fans love him, and from the promotional aspect, that's all that really matters, as long as he continues to win at least some of his fights, which obviously he does. But hopefully we'll be able to see him rise even further someday. I could see it at some point. He has the skills. It's just a matter of putting it all together against the right opponents. But UFC 302 in general, super fun time, even if it wasn't the most fun card, like I said in the beginning.
Yeah.
But, like you said, Trump was there, Aaron Rodgers, Joey Diaz, Theo Vaughn, Daniel Ricciardo, like all these cool celebrities showing out in Newark, of all places. It was cool to see. I definitely enjoyed the atmosphere, not just at Fight Night, but really throughout that whole weekend. I think our state definitely showed out for the UFC.
Yup.
Are we surprised?
No.
Are we surprised that New Jersey showed the UFC who's boss?
Exactly, man. Yeah, that's why UFC will keep coming to here to New Jersey, wherever it may be, obviously Atlantic City, Newark, there's an event, there's a UFC event going on in New Jersey. You can expect the fans to turn up and be super passionate and loud. So it was I knew we had to be a part of it somehow, so happy to make it happen.
Well, I'll tell you where the fans aren't going to show up loud and proud, and that is Dublin, Ireland, for the UFC 303 press conference that was canceled very abruptly between Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler. And, it's all speculation right now as to what's going on. Ariel Helwani has confirmed that it's nothing like scandalous, nothing bad has happened, no arrests, no crazy things, which has led many to speculate that Conor McGregor could be injured. And that, I don't know if that's the case. Obviously, we don't have... If Ariel Helwani's not saying it, we don't really know. You know what I mean? So, I guess the place I want to go with this, since there really isn't anything set in stone yet, but I'm sure there will be tomorrow when we post the pod, as always, it seems like. For those who don't know, it seems like every time we have, like, a story where it's, like, something's in doubt, we release the pod, and then the thing that was in doubt isn't right when we release it. So, as of the recording of this on June 4th, we still don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Conor McGregor could be injured. If he's not in the main event of UFC 303, how detrimental could this be for the card?
Well, I mean, it looks like it could be pretty detrimental. I mean, because I saw the conversation in general that Conor McGregor undercards aren't that great. This one I haven't seen any different. I mean, you had the co-main changed as well with Olberg stepping in instead of Khalil Roundtree.
Yeah, MVP and Gary's a good fight. I mean, there's like good fights on there, but yeah, it's not the star power besides McGregor, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. You got Ian Gary fighting down, which is something he said he would never do. So there's that. I mean, yeah, man. Like, I guess what more is there even really to say? I guess just I don't know what the injury could be or where it could come from, but I mean, shit. Like, if we're left in the dark right now, then all we can do is just wait and see, pretty much. But I don't know, man. I feel like in a way, you gotta. I definitely feel for Michael Chandler. I mean, damn, I don't know, because it's if you would think it wouldn't be the the fight entirely. I mean, obviously Conor McGregor would pull out, but would someone step in for him?
Well, that was going to be my next question, because it seems like it's been both things have kind of been felt out, whether it be a replacement to fight Chandler or if it's just an entire new main event, which I think would be smarter, if I'm being honest. I don't think Chandler versus somebody in a non-title fight is, unless it's like Nate Diaz, which does anyone want to see that right now? It's kind of like, how many more things could you do at Chandler that would be worthy of a pay-per-view main event? So I do think it'd be smarter to maybe get another fight on there. I don't know what it could be, but it's definitely not looking good. But the thing that is worth noting, Conor McGregor has never pulled out of a fight. We mess around sometimes about never knowing when he actually is going to fight until like there's an official announcement. But when we do get those official announcements, it's fair to expect Conor McGregor to be in there because he's never done anything different than that. So the fact that things are kind of swirling around this card right now, it's a bit concerning because we haven't seen this from Conor McGregor in the past. So if there is an injury, it must be something not very good if we're even talking about this right now. Because Conor McGregor has gone into fights with torn ACLs, broken bones, fractures. Like, you'd wonder what's going on right now. That's for sure. I mean, I hope it's nothing. I want to see this fight. The closer it's gotten, the more hyped I've really gotten thinking about it because stylistically, even though McGregor hasn't looked the same these past few years, I do think Michael Chandler's style kind of plays well into Conor's. So it could be a really interesting matchup, and I really, really hope that it doesn't get canceled. But I guess that's where we'll leave it until we hear something else. And to move on to another interesting matchup that was announced recently, I did like a little short about it just because it was such huge breaking news, but this is the first time we'll be talking about it on the pod. Nick Diaz returning again to fight Vicente Luque at UFC Abu Dhabi, August 3rd. So the first thing I want to talk about is the matchup itself. I've heard people kind of criticizing the matchup. To a point, I get it, but I also don't hate it because Vicente Luque hasn't looked the same in his last few fights. He's showing his age a little more. And honestly, both of the Diaz brothers are such kind of like a wild card at this point. I never really know what to expect. Like, even when Nick Diaz fought Robbie Lawler, like, he didn't even look like he was in insane shape that fight, and he looked like a lot slower. But in terms of his technique, like, his boxing was still there. He was still landing combinations. And considering Luque hasn't looked the same in his last few fights, I wouldn't say that Nick Diaz has no chance. Like, people are, like, afraid for him coming into this fight. I think that that's a bit crazy. Like, I understand picking against him, but I don't think that this is as, like, insane of a matchup as people may think it is. And I get that some people want to see Tony Ferguson versus Nick Diaz, but I don't really know if we're going to see that. Plus, you never really see Nick and Nate fight the same guys. It just doesn't really happen much anymore. So
it's interesting to me for Luque going from his last fight being someone like Joaquin Buckley, who's already fighting in a different division and just seemingly improving like slightly more and more with each fight, like specifically talking about Joaquin Buckley as a grappler. Going from that loss that you obviously, I would say, like, no one's all that used to seeing Vicente Luque take, and now taking this fight with a returning Nick Diaz, who is maybe it's interesting at this point with Nick Diaz. I think Nick Diaz is, I think a lot of people are obviously expecting that Diaz flair and that just that ruthless pushing forward pressure mentality, but to start, I feel like these two are probably going to look to fill each other out quite a bit, in the sense that things could get a little dull, at least in the beginning, but
I don't know about that, though. Nick Diaz, like, even when he fought Robbie Lawler, he hadn't fought in, 5-6 years at that point, and he still came forward, like, and I know Robbie Lawler at that point was a bit older, but still,
I don't know, because then
punch.
I feel like it's just, if it is far worse early, then maybe I guess more so on Nick Diaz's front, like, is cardio gonna come into play? Do you think he's gonna start feeling tired? Because I think
it's 5 rounds. Yeah. We should say that
it's 5 rounds. I didn't even know that either. I mean, there you have it. Because I think Luque is still going to be able to, still hang on the feet and then, probably have the advantage on the ground. But
I don't know, though. As I'm saying, like, I never know what to think about Nick Diaz because he has, like, the skills. It's just in terms of his, like you said, his cardio or his physique, just the shape that he's in coming into the fight. Because if this is like a Nick Diaz who's committed and is coming to fight, I get that he's older, but this is a dude who was once like a really good boxer in MMA and he has elite jiu-jitsu. I always say this, like, Nick Diaz in his prime was the better fighter between him and Nate. I think Nick's boxing is more refined. He's better at landing more combinations. He's a bit more elusive. And on the ground, he really attacks for those submissions. And plus, he has a little bit better takedown defense, I would say, than Nate. And I don't know if Luque is going to be really trying to take him down, because you can't really take Nick Diaz down and expect like nothing to happen, because GSP and people like that could take Nick Diaz down and hold him there. But Vicente Luque isn't really the take you down, hold you down, ground and pound type of guy. He's more of a grappler in the sense that Nick Diaz is. He goes for chokes off of like scrambles and opportunities. So I personally expect this fight to be on the feet more, which I mean, who knows how that's going to turn out. It's a tough fight to predict, and I'm not hating on this matchup like some fans are. I do think this is going to be a good fight. Call me delusional, but I do think.
Yeah, fair enough. I think, fair enough. I think fans are probably also factoring that, the 5 rounds, and I think just that sense, like they want to see Nick Diaz on the gas early.
I don't think comparing like his last fight to this is fair either, because if you remember when his last fight against Lawler got announced, he was in insane shape, and then it seemed like some old faces kind of came around at the end of that camp, and then all of a sudden Nick wasn't really in as good of shape. And if that problem's not here this time, we could see a different Nick Diaz. Like, I don't think him fighting Robbie Lawler was the most like ideal circumstances for him at the time. It just didn't seem like he even really wanted to be there that much by the time fight week came around, which is kind of sad to see for a legend of the sport. But we've read reports he's been itching for a fight. He's talked about plenty of people, from George St. Pierre to Kevin Holland to Vicente Luque, and Diaz wants to fight if he's taken a fight on a co-main event of a non-pay-per-view card against Vicente Luque, who's obviously well established in MMA, but he's not like a huge superstar. So clearly Nick Diaz does want to get in there and compete. It's just a matter of can he? And I think that this Luque matchup is a unique opportunity for him to kind of show what he's got. Because I think if he beats Vicente Luque, that's a pretty impressive thing to do, considering he's only had 2 fights. This will be his second fight this decade, pretty much. Since 2015, he's fought twice, after that Silva fight, which is crazy to think about. And Vicente Luque, I think he's in a great position too, because he's coming off a few losses. He's fighting a guy who, has the name value but might not be the same anymore. But if he wins, he still beat Nick Diaz. It's still the same guy at the end of the day. So I think it's an intriguing matchup. August 3rd, 5 rounds, the co-main event of Umar Nurmagomedov and Corey Sandhagen, which I think is also going to be a fun 5-rounder. I think Abu Dhabi, they're in for a fun one on August 3rd, personally.
I feel like that card right there is definitely for the Just Bleed fans.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Tony Ferguson, Michael Chiesa is also on the card. I'm sure there's more fights that, we're not talking about right this second that we'll get to, but we'll definitely be getting to it as it comes closer. But to talk about next week, UFC Louisville, main event, Jared Cannonier versus Nasruddin Imavov. Also some good fights around it. Dom Reyes versus Dustin Jacoby. 2 awesome strikers. That's going to be a banger. Finally, get to see Raul Rosas Jr. versus Ricky Tercios. Fun card overall. I'm so ecstatic that we're actually getting in front of more and more fans. And Dana's kind of kept his word so far about trying to get out of the Apex a little bit, because it seems like even for the fight nights, for the most part coming up, we're starting to get more and more of them in front of crowds in different cities around the world. And that's great for the sport, because this is how the UFC built its name. We've talked about it so many times. Now they're in Louisville, which I can't even remember the last time they were in Louisville. And this is a really fun card. And I'm looking forward to talking about it next week. But until then, check out all the other content we got going. We do have an interview coming up as of now. I'm going to be talking to Ashik Ajam from Combat FC. Just won the title, obviously, at Combat FC 7. Check out that vlog if you haven't already. So this will be coming out, obviously, Wednesday. And I'm doing the interview tomorrow night, which is Wednesday. and I'm hoping it'll probably be up around Friday. So stay tuned for that. Hoping that'll be a good one. I'm expecting it to be. And we've had a lot of cool content lately, haven't we?
Yeah, man. Crazy weekend. Hell, for sure. Got the poster from the roadshow to give Ariel one last shout, of course. Right there, looking pretty nice.
And New York Rick, who
Macho
this
Man.
pod is dedicated to, as you guys seen in the beginning. You haven't seen it yet. I'll show you after the pod. But yeah, this pod is dedicated to our guy New York Rick. You know, he's been an insane resource just for me personally, but just for us as a whole. I think I've used some of the stuff that he's kind of, you know, passed on to me to make the Hurt Handbook better, and some of the things he suggested have directly led to good results. So New York Rick is the man. He's helped so much with my own journey in this crazy world of MMA media, and also just getting us into that VIP section in the Ariel. Insane.
Yeah, dude. The vlog from this past weekend is super crazy for sure. And yeah, you guys seem to really be enjoying it. So thanks a whole lot. Yeah, man, that's it. That vlog's on a crazy pace too, man. We'll see. Maybe it gets to our most viewed video, if not the second, third, something like that. But
help us get it there.
Yeah,
please.
Thanks.
Hurt Handbook Nation.
Thanks everyone, a whole lot for sure.
I just sounded like Russell Wilson there. Hurt Handbook Nation. Let's ride.
Let's ride.
But
yeah, so
let's ride.
UFC 302 is a wrap. Thanks everyone.
We're out.